Welcome to Inside Out, where today we will be exploring the issues of school funding down here in the southwest. Many schools in our region have been struggling financially to keep up with the important requirements made for teachers and head teachers to manage successfully in schools. But as the southwest receives a serious lack of funding compared to inner city schools due to social deprivation and the rural location of certain schools, how does this affect our pupils in the long run? I'm here at Woodford Primary School in Plympton, one of the many schools in the southwest that has been struggling with cuts, but I want to take a closer look at how it's affected this school in particular and what the school has to say about it. Woodford Primary School is one of the many schools in the southwest that has suffered from cuts in the past, leaving the school feeling shortchanged. As there has been a lack of money for the school, teachers and head teachers are trying their best to make sure the pupils get the best education they deserve. Head teacher Philippa Harvey shares with me what the lack of funding has on Woodford School and what needs to be done about the issue across the southwest as a whole.
Woodford School is one of the lowest funded schools in the southwest, albeit nationally. I should think we're in the lowest percentile of schools, and within a trust of 5 schools, all of which are the lowest funded schools nationally. So for a comparison, the children here, we would get around about £3,500 per child. Other schools locally may get £4,500. When you multiply that by the 458 children who are in the school, that's a significant shortfall in funding, because that's a shortfall in funding annually. Also because we're in a relative area of social privilege as opposed to social deprivation, we're not able to access, or we don't have much access to things which might supplement that income, like the pupil premium funding, for instance, which some of the inner city schools do receive.
But as Philippa explains to me that the school struggles with the amount of funding they receive, I want to see where the school desperately needs the money.
Well, there are lots of what we call capital projects which we would like to do around school, and every year is a bit of a juggling act to make the money go around to do the things that we need to do. And so there are things like we have on the outside of walls, which you would see on our top playground where the year 5 and 6 children play, that's deteriorated over the years. In other schools, they might be able to get those re-screeded, painted, all of those kind of things. Well, we've waited a good number of years until we've actually had a caretaker who's manually painted it himself. We couldn't afford to get somebody to come in and do that from outside, and so that's just a very small illustration, because there are things that you would do which just make the place look like it's cared for and maintained, really. One of the projects that we're bidding for external funding for is to replace the flat roofing, which is on most of the buildings. If we get that funding, then we'll be able to afford to do it. If we don't, then we won't, and the things that we have like leaking skylights and things like that, that'll just continue. That's not necessarily going to make a great contribution to their education. It just makes the buildings comfortable to be used, really.
Elsewhere in the school, you can see the lack of funding there is, from the rush that's starting to show outside the building and how the majority of the school has been placed outside to stay within the budget.
We work really hard to still provide a really broad, balanced, enriched curriculum, despite of the fact that we have such low funding. So we provide a wide range of extracurricular opportunities in sport and in music, in things like science and technology with visits to Plymouth University, 80 children participating in the Children's University with Plymouth University, 194 children taking part in the Plymouth Schools Half Marathon Challenge. So we think that that's an essential part of the children's education, and we very much look for to engage in those opportunities. But of course there is a bit of a limit to that, because some of that has to come through voluntary contribution from parents, and where we get that, of course we can do those kind of activities. If we don't, then it comes down to sometimes the goodwill of staff to run those activities.
But taking a closer look, I want to find out from the teachers themselves on the effect it has on them as a colleague and the expectations they must hold to provide a decent education for their pupils.
Just been given a 2% pay rise, but that 2% doesn't really reflect the amount of hours that we put into teaching. We come in, most of us will be in at 7:30 in the morning. We don't leave till 6 o'clock. We go back to our families, and then at 7 o'clock we start working again, some evenings till as late as 11:30, marking books. So in terms of the pay, what it doesn't cover are those extra hours that you're working in the evenings, working at the weekends. I will give up my Friday, Saturday nights to do schoolwork, Sunday nights, and then during the 13 weeks holiday, we do have time to relax with our families, but a lot of that time will also be spent preparing for lessons.
Facts and figures have shown that since 2010, per pupil funding has gone down by 8%, resulting in cuts to local services. And at St Ives School in Cornwall, for example, receives £4,054 per pupil, whereas in Hackney, located in London, receives £6,230 per pupil. Statistics such as this show the true difference between regions in the UK regarding funding. But as rural areas surround the South West, the government believes that more money should go to inner city schools where there are larger populations. But it's not only the teachers and pupils who have been affected by these cuts. Elaine Cox has worked in schools for most of her career. Things took a turn when Elaine was made redundant after 19 years of working at a primary school. Elaine now works part-time at a school in Plymouth and also has a second job to help get by.
Within a short time of actually working within the school, because I was in the office side of it, and being in the business for so long, you know when there's something not quite right. And there was too many meetings for my liking with the head, with the governors, various other people coming in, and that happens about 6 months into my job, and just things weren't sitting comfortably with me. And then there was talk within the school that the budget was really bad. They were due to be getting a really severe budget, and costing of keeping the building maintained, and also doing paying wages, and obviously the council just cut it so drastically. And unfortunately in 2016 I was made redundant. It was a real absolute shock after working for 19 years with South Hams Council, living comfortably, you know, not having to really worry, having animals to care for, grandchildren, being able to do things, to suddenly realising at my age, and I was 54, nearly 55 then, that my whole life was going to change. Because when you get to that age, there's not many jobs out there for somebody. I wasn't the only one affected. Unfortunately, that very end of that term, 6 members of staff had to go because the budget was so bad, and the school just could not deal with it. And to my knowledge, I believe we weren't the only one. Plymouth was severely affected that year by one of the worst budgets ever.
The way it affects students here in the South West is through the lack of resources there are compared to inner city schools. Teachers are finding the roles extra difficult now there is more time put into the work to provide for the students, and it has also affected people's lives from cuts that have been made to keep within a certain budget. But schools such as Woodford run the extra mile to ensure their pupils receive the best education there is possible. It's in the government's hands to resolve the issue and to ensure that all pupils in the South West are benefiting from the same education inner city schools receive here in the UK. This is Inside Out South West.